It's a damn shame what the world's gotten to. For people like me, people like you. Wish I could just wake up and it not be true. But it is, oh it is, living in the new world with an whole soul.
Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today is October 6th, 2023. And when asked about the updated debt charge numbers, no numbers could be given for right now. So previously, our budget was based on debt charges being in the 1% range. So how much interest are we paying on our debt? And now it's multiplied 4 times, 5 times, 6 times. I don't know what the interest rate is now that the government is paying on the debt, 4%, 5%, whatever it is. But how much more does it cost to carry that debt? They don't know, and they're not telling us. And I'll show you that exchange in the House. Grocery price stabilization moves are happening, and the government is forcing the grocers to increase competition. And I'll show you what that looks like. They're making an announcement like it's great. We're definitely tackling these price issues, but they're not actually dealing with the core of the issue. They're stimulating competition, fine, but the inflationary pressures are still there. The situation where the input costs are increasing is getting worse, not better. And these are stopgap measures that aren't going to actually solve the problem. They're going to maybe stave off the worst impact of it for a time. But if you've got price controls in place, if you have X amount of money to produce bread and you have price controls, so you're only going to make X amount of money, then shortages start. And that's not good. And so the government will blame climate change. But at this point, they're blaming grocers, right? So we'll look at all of that. Isn't a renter's strike a self-eviction? Jagmeet Singh is promoting this ridiculously stupid idea of having a renting strike. And if you stop paying your rent, well, that's not going to go well. It's not like the landlord's going to say, "Oh, shucks, you're real correct. I don't need any money for that asset of mine that you're living in." That's not going to happen. Sorry. So yeah, you're going to get evicted, and it's just a matter of time. And if the eviction is, I've got a renovation coming up and sorry, you're out. Well, I mean, it's your own damn fault. I think it's a bad idea to recommend this to other people. And if you want to lower rents, demonizing landlords is not the way to do it. Giving people the idea that they can live in somebody else's asset while the person who's the landlord has to pay for it is a bad idea, and the landlords aren't going to like it, right? Are you and possibly the renters there are many more of them than there are landlords, but it's a bad strategy fundamentally anyway, I think. Trudeau reimagines his response to the September 20th protesters, the Million March for Children. He says, "I never called anybody hateful. I never said that." And I have the tweet where he said that. Podcast gate rears its ugly head. Putin calls Trudeau either an idiot or a villain. Yep. I don't think he's wrong. I'll read it out to you. And Freeland is asked about her education vis-a-vis her clapping for somebody who fought for the SS. And she plays dumb and blames the former speaker. To be clear, it's the former speaker's fault and not my fault. It's everybody but my fault. It's not my fault. It's his fault. Their fault. Very interesting stuff. Lots to get to, so let's get to it. First, we have to start at Putin. This is Putin, and he is being interviewed, somewhere, Validity, I guess, the discussion club. And he says, we relate to Canada. We very much relate to Canada. But he says, Trudeau, if he doesn't know history, he's an idiot. And if he does know, well, he's a villain, right? Here we go. We relate to Canada no matter what, with respect. Hold on. I can't do it while I'm listening to him. I can't. Okay, here we go. No matter what, with respect especially to the people. But if he doesn't know, Trudeau, that during the war, Hitler and his henchmen fought against Russia, then he's an idiot. Yep, I don't think that's wrong. He's continuing. It means he just didn't study at school. Has no basic knowledge. But if he knows that this man fought on Hitler's side and calls him a hero of Ukraine and a hero of Canada, then he's a villain. It's either this or that, right? I don't know that that's an incorrect argument or an incorrect assessment. I think that's probably pretty spot on. What did you know and when did you know it, sir? Did you do any historical reading of the Second World War? You can't handle the truth. Global News is reporting Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland says that Putin is weaponizing the mistake of Canada inviting Yaroslav Hunka to Parliament. So we horribly embarrassed ourselves on the international stage in a way that is very, very cringy. And just because of the shared history of the Second World War all across the world, what everybody believes to be true, this is a grave, grave error, right? A very big mistake. And the deputy prime minister, and like people noticing, that's going to happen. Vladimir Putin, who NATO is waging a war against through Ukraine, is going to notice these things. He's going to comment about these things. And like, I didn't put any words into his mouth. I just said what he said. But apparently, him having an opinion on Canada's stupidity and or villainy is weaponization of Canada being stupid or villainous. Okay. Here's Global News. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland says that Putin is weaponizing the mistake of Canada inviting Yaroslav Hunka. So just wild stuff. Back at home, the True North is asking a reporter asks Deputy Prime Minister Freeland her thoughts about Parliament inviting and honoring a Ukrainian veteran who fought for a Nazi military unit. Freeland, who is very familiar with the history of Ukraine during World War II, points a finger at the former Speaker, Anthony Rota. It's not my fault. It's definitely his fault. Absolutely 100% his fault. It is interesting because Freeland uses a lot of nonsense words as filler, I think. And so let's listen. Here we go.
Historians familiar with history.
Oh, that's a little too fast. Here we go. And it's a little loud too, I think. We'll turn it down a little bit. Here we go.
Of Ukraine and the Soviet Union during the Second World War say the fact that so many Canadians do not know much about this history played a role in how Yaroslav Hunka ended up being recognized in the House of Commons last month. You're someone who is familiar with that history. So when the former speaker introduced Yaroslav Hunka as a, quote, Ukrainian-Canadian war veteran from the Second World War who fought for Ukrainian independence against the Russians, what did you think in that moment?
So I think it's really important to start with the tremendous pain that this brought to so many communities in Canada, starting with the Jewish community in Canada. I actually this morning spoke with a rabbi who serves a synagogue in my own riding, and he talked to me about how painful it was for him and his congregation. And I think that's something that we all need to recognize and be really, really aware of, and listen. I think the second thing that is very important to recognize is this was the sole initiative of the former speaker. He did not inform the government of Canada or the government of Ukraine about what he was going to do. It was a very grave error that was painful for Canadians, painful.
She doesn't get anywhere close to the question. I put the question on the screen just for anybody who, like you'd be forgiven for forgetting what the heck she's talking about, what question she's answering. The question is, you being a scholar in this area, having family ties in Ukraine, and literally written the book on the Waffen SS division that this man was a part of, with your family. I think with your grandfather, maybe uncle. I can't remember which one. No, grandfather, and then the uncle wrote the book. You would know. And she sits there and talks about how painful it would be because a rabbi told her so. I mean, honestly, she gets nowhere near it. And then says, totally not my fault. The second most important thing that we all learned when we stood and clapped for this Nazi guy is that it was all Rota's fault. He snuck that guy in the cover of night. We didn't know what the heck he was going to do, which, I mean, speakers do these kind of things all the time. They'll just bring in people without telling the government willy-nilly, right? They'll just be walking along the street and they'll say, hey, buddy, you want to have a standing ovation in the House of Commons? I'll introduce you. Come on in. And then, nobody knows. Nobody gets told or anything like that. Obviously, like the speaker just has total unilaterality. That's not the right way to say that. To bring in anybody they want, right? They can just do anything they want. They don't even have to ask anybody. They're the Speaker of the House. They have so much power. It's unbelievable. And Rhoda went drunk with power. He started inviting Nazis, right? It's his fault, not our fault, obviously, because the government bears no responsibility because Rhoda's so powerful. I mean, the Speaker. Tokyo Rose says, Liberal MP with a degree in Russian history and Slavonic studies from Oxford University had no idea a World War II veteran of the Ukrainian 14th Waffen Grenadier Division of the SS could be a Nazi. I guess Rhodes scholars aren't what they used to be. Ooh, right? Zing, zing. Rhodes scholars are just, they're not well-rounded, I suppose. They're not financiers, but this one's a finance minister. Michael Cooper they're talking about looking into this. How did this happen? And how this happened is obviously Rhoda went rogue. He went completely rogue. I can't wait for his ambassadorship position to be announced because that's coming. Michael Cooper says, under PMJT, Prime Minister Trudeau, under his watch, a former SS military soldier was shamefully honored in Parliament during the address of the President of Ukraine. This is Prime Minister Trudeau's biggest international embarrassment. Canadians deserve answers. I will be moving this motion at the PROC to hold hearings on this disaster. And then the updated tweet, that was from morning October 5th. And from afternoon October 5th, this was tweeted out 2:04 p.m. He says, I signaled my intention to initiate a study at PROC on the disgraceful honoring of a former SS soldier in the House of Commons. The Liberal chair scheduled the meeting behind closed doors. After a 2-hour meeting, I have no news about this that I'm permitted to share. Draw your own conclusions. So it was Rhoda's fault. That guy operating totally rogue and unilaterally and absolutely at no time. He was like Jack Bauer in 24, right? We're pretty sure this guy's got a nuke and we're pretty sure he's going to use it or whatever. And he hasn't talked to us about it. He has not been in contact. Not at all. Nobody's said anything, the word boo to him. It's very interesting that Rhoda's taking all this heat. Like he is going to put out a book and it'll be a bestseller and nobody will have read it. They don't make a lot of money. Here is Michelle Rempel's Substack, and this was sent to me, talking about the conflict of interest that the removal of Rhoda and the election of a speaker mid-session causes. This is a problem, but it's not a problem that anybody's going to deal with at all, ever, period. A problem emerges for Speaker Fergus. What will he do? And she boils it down. She explains it in parliamentary terms, but here's where she boils it down to kind of layman's terms. She says, so in layman's terms, the problem the House faces now is this. One of the foundations of the Canadian Parliament and Canadian democracy is the concept of parliamentary privilege, which is defined as the rights and immunities that are deemed necessary for the House of Commons as an institution and its members as representatives of the electorate to fulfill their function. When a member of Parliament feels that their privilege, their ability to complete their job, has been breached, they can raise something called a question of privilege in the House of Commons. The Speaker of the House of Commons then undertakes deliberations on the matter and makes a ruling on whether the House of Commons should consider the matter further. So the Speaker's got a very important role in this. Under normal circumstances, it would be virtually impossible for the Speaker of the House to ever find themselves in a potential conflict of interest situation when making one of those rulings. That's because the Speaker is a member of Parliament elected to the office by their peers at the start of Parliament immediately after an election. Elections wipe away the slate of Parliament clean. In turn, a Speaker wouldn't be caused to rule on matters that took place that they may have been involved in from the previous Parliament. However, this week, the House of Commons had to elect a new Speaker in the middle of the parliamentary term after former Speaker Rhoda resigned in the wake of recognizing a former Nazi soldier during an address to Parliament by Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. Greg Fergus was elected to the role. Newly minted Speaker Fergus also held several official government roles until his election to the Speaker's chair on Tuesday. In fact, up until September of this year, Fergus had served as the parliamentary secretary to the Prime Minister. In this capacity, he would have had formal responsibility for undertaking duties on behalf of the Prime Minister, like answering questions on his behalf in question period, tabling documents, and signing off on things like order paper questions. And therein lies the problem at hand. Now, Speaker Greg Fergus will have to rule on whether there's enough evidence for the House to consider if Greg Fergus, former parliamentary secretary to the Prime Minister, potentially breached members' privilege by misleading the House when he signed off on the order paper question about the Prime Minister's trip to Montana that CBC reported about this morning. The occupant of the Speaker's chair must be viewed with an unimpeachable neutral arbiter of the House proceedings. A speaker having to rule on a question of privilege on a matter caused by them during their former role in government is another incredible matter entirely. Members, mostly Liberals, by all account, who voted for him should have considered this prior to casting their ballots. The problem is the amount reported to Parliament and signed off by Speaker Fergus in his parliamentary secretary role is different than the total amount that was actually charged for the trip. So it's an interesting problem. Back to this. To be clear, I bear no ill will to Speaker Fergus. He's an affable man, and while this situation suggests that perhaps there should be some rules to prevent someone who held a former role in the government from occupying the Speaker's chair during the same Parliament, at present there aren't. Mr. Fergus is occupying the Speaker's chair by virtue of his legal election to it. So out of respect for the office of the Speaker, it's a central function within the institution of Parliament. I am honor bound to afford him the respect he deserves in the role of Speaker. However, for the same reason, he is also bound to respect the office of the Speaker as well, specifically in determining what will be done with matters of privilege that involve his actions as a government appointee. This is a matter that affects the privilege of all members. The Speaker's ruling set precedent. It could be a breach of all members' privilege if he makes even one ruling for which he cannot conceivably be impartial due to the nature and actions of his previous government roles. Arguably, public opinion of the Speaker's chair already took a grievous blow this month. Confidence in the judgment of its office holder must now be protected more than ever. The Speaker has the ability to recuse himself by allowing the House to consider the matter at hand. In this instance, the correct course of action should be to allow the House to determine the outcome. Then the outcome would be a decision of the House, not the Speaker. If Speaker Fergus elected this course of action, he would demonstrate his commitment to upholding impartiality of the chair. So, yeah, it's an interesting conundrum. There seems to be a pretty obvious way out. Watch for Speaker Fergus's ruling on this any day now. I believe that I rule that I acted appropriately and everything's fine. Next question. Let's talk about Podcast Gate. CBC Watcher I like memes. I think they're really good because they relay a lot in just an image. You can understand what's going on with just an image, no reading needed. So here is CBC Watcher, and he's got the CRTC Canadians react to censorship. And liberal red tape is the name of this meme, and it's got a broadcaster tied up on his broadcast chair with red tape, and the red tape goes around his mouth, and it says CRTC regulations, and the mic says podcasts, right? Like if you had a little thing on the mic that said something that says podcast. So it's quite accurate. It's quite interesting. I don't think they'll be able to shut them down. I think that people will find... Now, it's already difficult for new people to find me. My podcast never grows. So they've effectively shut me down. And I don't know that they can go further than this. I don't know that they can stop my broadcasts completely and entirely. I don't know that they can do that. I have a website that I publish to. I'm not a 10 million whatever distribution network or something like that in Canada. So I don't know that they could shut me down. But they're certainly trying. And so I don't know what the outcome of this is going to be. It seems like when things like this happen, there's broad awareness, and then the broad awareness fades into forgetting. And then all of a sudden you're like, who's that guy who got charged with sexual assault before Russell Brand? Not charged with sexual assault, but canceled for sexual assault before Russell Brand. I was talking to him, and I was talking to somebody else, and I couldn't remember the guy after this guy. Tate. It was Andrew Tate. I said, who's the guy who got charged with the sexual assault stuff after Tate? And a couple of seconds later, they were like, Brand, right? So it fades into the ether. You forget, and then you just forget, and it's gone. Poof, gone, right? And so I don't know if they're going to be effective. I think they thought C11 was going to be effective at shutting people down, but they realized there were holes in it. C18 they thought was going to be effective at shutting people down, but they realized there were holes in it. They're going to kill social media. Like nobody's going to use Facebook. It's like MySpace. Do you go on MySpace? It's going to be the same with Facebook. Nobody's going to bother with it because it's useless. And it's just propaganda. Like if you show up somewhere and it's like, these cricket bites are great, you're not going to hang out. You're not going to be like, oh, this seems like a cool place. Right? So like they'll kill social media. They'll kill it. And they're fine with that. They're fine with that because then we're fractured in a way that is Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.